returned back to the people because this stuff was stolen. It's stolen property. You can't just go into somebody's country and town because it's in turmoil, because of some kind of war that was basically inflicted on them, and just take their possessions, their valuables. Yet it has been done to us for centuries. Of course, a lot of people don't even have a clue that Rome attacked Ethiopia, that Rome and Ethiopia went to war. People don't remember that Rome used chemical weapons on Ethiopia. This was around the time that Haile Selassie was in power, and he went to the United Nations and complained about it. So when people start talking about this Ethiopian Bible and Ethiopian creating Christianity or what have you, they don't know the damn history. They don't know what they're talking about. You have to go back and look at what was going on back then to understand that the Romans was coming in there for hundreds of years, for a long time, destroying shit, stealing artifacts. They pulled down a lot of those obelisks, the one they could pull down. They stole one. And this is what has been going on in so many different places in Africa. It's no coincidence that you go into the Sudan, you go into Ethiopia. As I talked about, what the hell is these people doing with a president, with a constitution that is Roman? And you have the Moors bragging about constitutions and shit like that. And come on, it's bullshit. Pay attention to what this stuff is about. The Roman Senate was set up the same way. They came in there, and you have to understand that we've been warring with these Europeans for a long time, and they have won in every single case. You have some places that's so remote that they don't want to go into, that they leave alone, because for the most part, it's not that much resources there. But any other place, they either turn the people against each other. They find one tribe that doesn't like another tribe, and they arm them or train them to go in there and wipe out other Africans. And we're just so lost and don't see what this whole thing is about, that these Africans just do what they got to do sometimes to survive, because they in fear that their village will get wiped out if they don't. But also, a lot of them are, basically poor, and they need, stuff to survive, supplies or what have you. So we see despicable things happen in Africa, but they are encouraged, influenced, and pushed, and in every way backed by these Europeans and these European powers, and they know exactly what they're doing. So we know why they're in Africa. We got to understand that. But you got to understand, to get back to my point, that, when you go back and look, the reason why this history is important, because it establishes a connection between, India coming into Ethiopia. When we look at those trade routes and understand that the Egyptians was coming down the Nile, that the Indians was coming over into Ethiopia, and they was trading right there. And in the Aksumite Empire, they was trading right along the Nile. They was trading with Ethiopia, and all the proof is there. The artifacts is there. The correspondence, the contacts, everything is there to show this connection. And that when you see the influence in Ethiopia, of course, you can imagine that the influence when the Indians came into Ethiopia, they could see it. And that when you had the Egyptians travel over to India and, what have you, that the influence definitely was brought there as well. And this is how Buddhism was, basically traveled, and how we can see it accepted by many different cultures. So when we look at the depictions of karate and martial arts and ancient Kemet, we can see that this is clearly where it generated from. Which karate, karate, you have ka, which is your energy or soul. We know Ra, which is the sun, or your pineal gland, your third eye, dealing with the mind. And you have te, which means you, your body. So we have karate. Karate is mind, body, and soul. When you put it all together, mind, body, and soul as one. So we look at this and understand the spiritual aspect and, the deep connection from karate, and how it can translate into what the ancient Egyptians talked about and what they talk about in spirituality terms and, Buddhism, ancient Kemet, or what have you. So a lot of people, when they look at India, they don't look at India and think about martial arts. And that's crazy, because India has a very ancient history, still to this day, going back with martial arts. We find unbelievable skills. When you think about kickboxing, remember first, you had the people migrate over into India before they even got into Thailand, before they became the Thai people. They was in India first. So, which is why we see India taking Buddhism over to Asia, and India taking kickboxing, the fighting techniques into Thailand. So you got to think about that. A lot of people always don't make that connection. When you look at Thai, it is a lot of Indian tradition mixed up in there. When you travel a lot, you see it. When you go back and forth to both places, you can see the mix. You see the elephant a lot. We understand the symbolism behind a lot of these things. But a lot of people don't make that connection with martial arts in India. And they have a history that goes back, past 1000 BCE with martial arts when you look at the Vedas. And the Vedas is basically like it's written in Sanskrit. It's basically the ancient history of Indian literature, put right there. You have the Vedas talking about, martial arts, talking about fighting techniques. You have the Dharma Veda, which translates into the science of archery, where you have them do techniques with the bow and other techniques using other weapons and, martial arts, combat skills or what have you. You have also Malayada, which translates into combat wrestling. And we know how important combat wrestling was in ancient Kemet, what we talked about before with the Egyptians holding wrestling competitions with the Nubians. So we have Dharma Veda, which goes into the science of archery and the military science of India. You have Malayada, which deals with combat wrestling. And we can see in ancient Kemet clearly, they used the bow. We can see about combat wrestling. We can see how all this stuff, corresponds with each other, how we find it in the civilizations in ancient Kemet and in India. So it's not a coincidence that we find wrestling in ancient India and we find wrestling in ancient Kemet and Nubia, what have you, because they share a lot of the same spiritualities and practices and what have you. So now we have Bodhidharma. And a lot of people don't know about Bodhidharma unless you really get into Buddhism. And Bodhidharma, which a lot is not known about his young life. He's believed to be a prince, son of an Indian king. And Bodhidharma was a Buddhist monk. Bodhidharma is considered basically the first Chinese patriarch because he's credited with bringing not only Chan Buddhism into China, but being one of the forefathers of Shaolin Kung Fu. So the legend goes with Bodhidharma, he came into China and went to the Shaolin temple and noticed that the monks there could not meditate for long periods of time without falling asleep. So Bodhidharma, understanding and having the techniques and knowledge about meditation, as I talked about before, when you pay attention to what the ancient Egyptians was using the techniques for, and when you go to Kemet, you can see they have on a lot of the on the walls and a lot of the pillars or what have you, you can see the techniques, the stance that they took in preparing for meditation. So again, this is another one of the ways we can see how the connection comes together with Buddhism and ancient Kemet, because Bodhidharma understood these techniques, and we can look at India as well and understand that, yes, they do have an ancient history of martial arts. And obviously, Bodhidharma knew it, and he brought it into the Shaolin Temple in China. And the fact that they recognize him as being the first patriarch is huge. It's huge for Buddhism. It's huge for understanding the history of Buddhism, which a lot of people are ignorant about and believe that Buddhism began in China with the Chinese. And a lot of times when we see monks, we don't always see the monks in India. A lot of people look at the yogis in India and go more towards that, Hinduism or what have you. And a lot of people don't like to make that connection with Buddhism in India and the fact that, the Indians brought Buddhism into China. So you had Bodhidharma bringing Chan Buddhism into China, teaching it to the Chinese, teaching the Shaolin monks these techniques. And a lot of people connect Shaolin with Kung Fu. And they go hand in hand, not knowing that before they ever known Kung Fu, they were just monks who knew no fighting techniques or what have you, until Bodhidharma came in there and began to teach them a series of stances, a series of moves and things to help them develop and to be able to meditate and stay in a meditative position for prolonged periods of time. So Bodhidharma came into the Shaolin Temple and taught them techniques and movements to help build their strength and endurance so they can sit in the meditative lotus position for long periods of time, so they can help and develop with meditation or what have you, so they can have combat techniques and self-defense techniques at their disposal and to use and develop, which of course we know they did. So, a lot of times when you see depictions of Bodhidharma, he looks white. You see him like looking white with a long beard. And Bodhidharma was talked about by different civilizations. So, he existed, he's a real dude. So the Japanese talked about him, of course, the Chinese and people in India, what have you. So he's written about by many different civilizations. So this is a real dude that existed. And Bodhidharma, he had blue eyes. They called him the blue-eyed barbarian. And because he was supposedly like stocky dude or what have you with this long black beard. He was in good physical shape, as they describe him. He was no joke. Now, he probably looked like this guy right here. You understand, African people, we have blue eyes too. Indian people have blue eyes as well. So a lot of people want to, of course, bring them over to the European side and say, yeah, see, Bodhidharma was, European now. We have those eyes as well. We have, of course, the long beards and what have you. And I believe that if you've seen the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen with Nemo, I think this is where they used Bodhidharma when they created Nemo. Even if you go back to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where you have Captain Nemo and everything, it don't really give you an understanding about his origin or what have you. But Jules Verne's, the guy who wrote the book, has another book called Mysterious Island, where you have Nemo, basically, whose name was Dakar, who was a prince. Just like you have Bodhidharma, who's a prince, you have Dakar in that book, who's a prince. And he would later become Nemo and, get into science and physics or what have you and create the Nautilus, the ship or what have you, the sword of the sea and all that. I think that's probably where they got the depiction from, thinking about Bodhidharma and creating Nemo or what have you. A lot of people make that connection. And remember, Nemo was no joke. He kicked ass as far as martial arts. When you look at the movie and when you understand the comics or what have you, and when they show him fighting, clearly this dude was a kung fu master. And a lot of people would never make that connection unless you dig in and doing the research and you start seeing so many different things pop up as relation to Bodhidharma, and how much so many people talked about how bad this dude was and what he meant to China, what he brought to the Chinese people. Now, when you look and pay attention, it's not so many people that we see, movies and even throughout history that we can find from India pertaining to martial arts. I mean, you don't really make that connection too much. I mean, you had Capcom at least put Dao Sim from Street Fighter, in the game. They had a Indian character, powerful and had moves or what have you, and they put him in a game. So they kind of gave people some kind of understanding that possibly India could possess, fighters with, techniques and skills or what have you. So as I talked about in energy and in frequency, in the dream state, when you look at that person that is you, the mental projection of your digital self, that looks real, and you start to understand, movement in the dream it feels, almost exactly the same as in real life. Everything is kind of cloudy and fuzzy or what have you, but for the most part, you can't really make a determination of, real or not real. You just really, you caught up in a dream state. So when you start understanding the fluidity of movement and energy in the body, and you become familiar with that, and you take control of that, it'll be easy for you to break out of it and control that same energy, just like you do in the body on the conscious level, but in the dream state on a subconscious level, once you start getting to that point. Same thing in meditation, when you start getting to that point, when we're talking about you consciously controlling energy that looks like you, that is you, but on an energetic level, and you being able to make those connections in movement because you have the knowledge of muscle memory, how energy flows through the body, and how you're supposed to move using your spiritual body in a meditative state and a dream state. So this all goes hand in hand. It's a big deal. It's really deep when you start getting into it. And it's a lot of books, which some is popping up on the screen now, that you can get into and really start to understand about this stuff and how important it is to have this muscle memory and have this energetic memory and understand how energy is flowing through you and how it's going to help you develop in meditation and help you be able to sustain these long meditative sessions. Because I'm telling you, the monks, when you get to that level, I mean, you talking about these people be meditating for hours, multiple hours, and it's deep. So you got to really have strong muscles and good muscle memory to not have your muscles bother you, with aches and pains while you're in that position for so long. So all this stuff goes really back into consciousness and energy. It's really martial arts used for those purposes to develop and to have, martial arts skills and self-defense skills, and at the same time develop your energy. Now, you see in a lot of those martial arts movies, you have a lot of martial arts masters talking about, using your skills only when needed. To learn all this kung fu, learn about karate and fighting, but not to use it. That was always the thing. You're not supposed to use the stuff. Just use it. It's an art. Use it to develop yourself, develop your energy, but don't use the stuff to harm people unless you have to. And when you have to use your art, you're supposed to do so to defend and protect, not so much to harm unless it absolutely comes down to that point. I know when I was taking it in the military, that's one of the things that they taught us. And, you have to really understand what you can do at that level, how the regular average person has absolutely no clue how much danger they are in when they encounter a person with that kind of skill, which is why it's always encouraged to just use the skill for the spiritual purposes and understand that while you have these techniques, you're not to really use them. So it's deep, it's crazy. And one of the things you're going to start to find when you start to really dig into all this stuff, especially Buddhism, especially looking at the many martial art forms that exist, which we'll get into a lot of them, not deeply, talk about them, but you see how all this stuff goes back to energy, frequency, vibration, exactly what we were just talking about. So you have what meditation. You have japa meditation, which japa meditation is basically when you meditate with music, with chanting, with mantras. So while you are in the meditative position, you'll basically hum or sing a mantra of something that you wish to obtain, something you're trying to do. And you will hum this mantra, put this mantra out as a song. Because remember, we're talking about music and stimulation. This has to do with vibration and frequency. So while you humming and singing this mantra, you basically run your hand across each mala bead. And you see a lot of times where Buddhist monks carrying the mala beads or the beads, you see, they carry the beads and what have you. Now, the thing is, the mala beads, it's 108 beads on that mala. On the mala bead, 108. You can count them for yourself. Trust me, it's 108. We know, if you've seen Frequency DVD, we know 108 translates into 9. Now, also, when you go to the Shaolin temple, when you go to the Tibetan temples, the Buddhist temples or what have you in Tibet and Thailand, it's 108 steps. 108 steps. We're seeing a lot of times, look at the pictures, you see that it's always all these stairs leading up to these temples. Trust me, I know I had to climb when I was in Thailand up to the temple in the sky. If you look at my intro on the video, I think right before one of the last videos is me. It's in the temple in the sky in Thailand. So you go up a lot of steps, 108 steps to get up there to these temples. So again, 108 translates into 9. Another thing, when you look at the 108 auspicious symbols on the bottom of Buddha's feet. Auspicious basically means, promising, favorable. So you have the 108 auspicious symbols on the bottom of Buddha's feet. When I went to Thailand, again, I took the picture with the Buddha statue for a reason. I took a picture by his feet for a reason because I understood what was on the bottom of his feet, which I also clearly took a picture of that. And you have these 108 symbols again. 108 equals 9. Here we have again that number 9 being really important.